Hold the card up, Mr. Dole. Higher. Let the room see it. That is not our engraving, and that is not our hand, and the woman holding it walked into this house on a forgery. Everard Cale, 5th Duke of Thurlow, heard it from the top of the staircase, over the heads of 400 people, and knew before he had gone down 3 steps that his aunt had chosen her moment with the care of a general. The ball at Thurlow House was the 3rd week of October, and the whole county came to it. The staircase was banked with hothouse fruit. There were 900 candles, and at the foot of it, in a clear space that the crowd had made the way crowds do, stood his aunt, Lady Honoria Prue, in garnet silk, and her secretary, Mr. Crispin Dole, with a card of invitation held up between 2 fingers like a dead mouse, and a woman in a grey silk gown that had been turned at the seams and dyed at least once. She was perhaps 26. She was not weeping. That was the first thing Everard noticed, and it was the thing he came back to for the rest of his life. 400 people were looking at her, and she had her chin level and her gloved hands folded, and she was waiting, quite patiently, to be allowed to speak. "There is some mistake," she said. "That card came to me by the post on the 8th of this month." "Cards do not come by the post," said Lady Honoria. "Cards are carried by our people, to houses on our list. You are not on our list. You have never been on our list. Your name is Marlowe, and you keep a day school for tradesmen's daughters in Cropstone Row, and I do not know which of your pupils' fathers engraved this for you, but I know what the law calls it." 4 months would pass before the Duke of Thurlow learned whose hand he had taken that night, and the learning of it would cost him his aunt, his secretary, and every comfortable thing he had ever believed about his own family. "The law," said Ruth Marlowe, "calls it uttering a forged instrument, my lady, and it is a hanging matter, or it was in my father's time. If you mean to charge me, charge me. If you do not, give me back my card, because it is mine, and I have nothing else in the world that came with my name written on it in a good hand." Mr. Dole said, "Shall I send for the constable, my lady?" And Everard Cale walked out of the crowd, took the card out of his secretary's fingers, put it into his coat, and offered Ruth Marlowe his hand. "Your Grace," said his aunt. "They are forming the second set," said Everard. "Miss Marlowe, I have no notion whether you dance. Neither has anybody here. I find I would rather they wondered about that than about the other thing." Ruth Marlowe looked at his hand for the space of 2 breaths. "You should not have done that," she said, in the first figure. "Probably not. You have made me interesting." "I have spent 9 years making certain I was not interesting." "My aunt made you interesting. I have only made you talked about." "They are the same thing to a woman who lives on 4 guineas a pupil," said Ruth Marlowe, and turned under his arm as neatly as anybody in the room. He did not see her leave. He looked for her at midnight, and she had gone, on foot in the rain, and had left the borrowed cloak with the porter, folded with a note of thanks. He came down to breakfast at 11 and found his aunt already at the table with the household books, perfectly serene, as she had been for the 19 years since his mother died, and she had come to keep his house. "That was very gallant," said Lady Honoria, "and very expensive. Sit down, Everard, and let me tell you what you have bought. I should like to know why a woman I have never met was called a felon on my staircase." "Because she was not asked." She poured his coffee. "There is a list. 211 houses. Mr. Dole engrosses it in November, and the cards go out in October, and that woman is not on it and has never been on it. And if a person who is not asked appears with a card in her hand, there are only 2 explanations, and one of them is flattering to nobody. The card is in my coat. It is our engraving. It is a good copy, aunt. It has our plate mark." Lady Honoria's hand did not falter with the coffee pot, but there was a moment, the smallest possible moment, a hair's breadth of stillness, before she said, "Then Mr. Dole shall look into it," and Everard, who had known her all his life, filed that moment away without knowing why. By Friday Ruth Marlowe had lost 6 of her 11 pupils. The house in Cropstone Row was not hers. It was leased, the schoolroom, the passage and 2 rooms above, for a term of 1 year at £26, and the lease was held from the Prue estate, which was to say from Lady Honoria. The quarter's rent, £6.10, fell due at Lady Day in March. 5 pupils at 4 guineas a year would not pay it. 11 had barely paid it. She had no family. She had a father dead 19 years and a mother dead 6. a room with a truckle bed, 31 books, and a year's lease she had signed with her own hand. She could not leave, because leaving with the rent unpaid meant the debtor's side of the county gaol, and she could not stay, because 5 pupils would not keep her, and she could not clear her name, because the only person in England who could say the card was genuine was the woman who had denounced her. Everard Cale stood at the window of his mother's morning room with a card of invitation in his hand, engraved, plate marked and pricked in one corner with a number he had not yet troubled to look at, and understood that he had taken a woman's hand in front of 400 people and had thereby closed the last door she had. 5 pupils, said Ruth Marlowe. 21 guineas a year, paid quarterly, and 2 of those 5 pay in kind because their fathers are cordwainers. Rent, 26 powls, condals, 30 shillings. Your Grace may do the arithmetic. Does not take long. I have done it. Then you will see there is no room in it for a visit from a duke, which costs nothing and is the most expensive thing that has happened to me this year. The schoolroom in Cropstone Row was 14 feet by 11, whitewashed, with a stove, 6 benches, a shelf of 31 books, and a window onto a yard where somebody kept fowls. Everard had been in it 4 minutes and had already knocked his head on the beam twice. I have brought you nothing, he said. That is the first sensible thing anybody from Thurlow House has said to me. I want to be clear about it, because I am told I am generous, and I have begun to suspect that is a word people use about men who do not have to think. I have not brought money. I have not brought coals. If I gave you either, this street would say by Sunday that you had been paid, and they would say what they were being paid for. Ruth Marlowe put down the slate she was cleaning. Then why are you here? Because I took your hand in front of 400 people and it cost you 6 pupils, said Everard, and I would like to know what to do about that, and I have never in my life had to ask anybody what to do about anything. She looked at him for a long moment. She had a plain, clear, unhurried face and grey eyes and a smudge of chalk on her wrist. Then find out where my card came from, she said. Not for me. I know where it came from. It came by the post on the 8th, and the boy who brought it is 9 years old and lives over the chandler's and would say so to a magistrate. Find out for yourself, your Grace, because either your house sent it or somebody forged your house engraving, and one of those is a crime against me and the other is a crime against you, and your aunt has been remarkably incurious about which. Mr. Crispin Dole came to Cropstone Row on the last Tuesday in October with a paper and a proposal. Everard heard of it that evening and got the whole of it, twice, because the churchwarden of the parish had been in the passage the entire time and had gone home and told everybody. He offered her the surrender, the churchwarden said, her lease given up on the spot, the quarter's rent forgiven, and £10 in her hand to go quietly out of the county before Christmas. And he said, begging your Grace's pardon, but he said it in front of me, that if she would not take it, her ladyship would have the arrears at Lady Day and the constable after, and the forgery laid before the magistrates besides. And Miss Marlowe? Miss Marlowe asked him to read her the 4th clause of her own lease. Everard set down his glass. She had it out of the box on the shelf, said the churchwarden, with immense relish, and she said, half a year's notice in writing, sir, under the covenant, signed by the lesser and not by the lesser's secretary, and you have brought me neither. She said, I am not to be turned out of a leasehold by a gentleman who has not read the instrument he is standing on. And she said, you may tell her ladyship that the rent will be paid at Lady Day in full in coin, and that I shall want a receipt. Will it be paid? That, said the churchwarden, she did not say, but 2 of the fathers were in the yard listening at the window, and both of them sent their girls back on the Thursday. 7 pupils. Everard went home and did a thing he had not done since he came into the title at 23. He opened the house books himself, in the muniment room, with 2 candles, and would not have Mr. Dole in the room. The ball list was a bound folio in a clerk's copperplate. 211 houses engrossed fresh every November, each with the number of cards against it. The cards themselves were engraved by Gaunt of Aldersea, who had done the house's work since before Everard was born, and Gaunt sent in his bill in December for the year's plate work and the year's printing. 211 houses. 241 cards, allowing for the houses that took 2 or 3. He turned to the bill, Gaunt of Aldersea, for engraving and printing cards of invitation to the Michaelmas ball at Thurlow House, 244, 3 more than the list, every year. He went back through the bills, 18 years of them in 3 different clerks' hands, and every single year the number on Gaunt's bill stood 3 above the number on the house list, and every single year the difference had gone through the accounts without one word of query. Because it was 3 cards and 3 cards cost 14 pence, he took Ruth Marlowe's card to the window and turned it to the light. There it was in the bottom corner, so small he had needed a glass to be sure, a number pricked into the paper with a fine point, the way a careful engraver marks a numbered set. 214. The last card on the list was 211. Everard Cale sat in his own muniment room at 2 in the morning with a forged invitation that was not forged, and 18 years of a stationer's bill that did not agree with 18 years of his aunt's list, and could not for the life of him think of a single reason why the house of Thurlow should have been printing 3 cards every year since before his mother died for houses that were not on it. "You have taken the ball list away from Mr. Dole," said Lady Honoria. "I have." "You have never looked at that list in your life." "That is precisely my difficulty, aunt," said Everard. "I have signed 18 years of bills I did not read, and I am beginning to find out what a signature is for." 3 cards, he said, every year since before my mother died. "Gaunt prints 244 and your list asks for 241. What are the 3? "Whist," said Lady Honoria. "Spoiled sheets. Ask any printer." "I have asked a printer. A printer does not prick a number into a spoiled sheet." "Then ask Gaunt," she said, "and mind you do not get an old man into trouble at his time of life." And she went out, and the door shut with the particular quietness of a door shut by a person who is very angry indeed. He did not ask Gaunt. He thought about it for 4 days and did not do it, and afterwards, when he understood what those 4 days had been worth, he set them down honestly in his own mind as the second worst thing he did that winter. He went to Cropstone Row instead on a wet Tuesday in November, with 18 years of stationer's bills under his arm. They worked at the schoolroom table until the candle was 2 inches down. Ruth on the bills, Everard on the lists, the stove ticking, wet wool steaming on the back of a chair, tea in a cup with a crack in it that she said had been cracked when she got it and would outlive them both. 18 years, she said, not 17, not 19. It begins in the year before your mother died and it never stops. My mother died when I was 11. Then somebody set something going that year and nobody in your house has had the authority or the curiosity to stop it since. She turned the bill to the light. Your Grace, what was your mother's hand like? Small, upright. She crossed her 7s. He heard himself say it and was surprised. He had not thought of it in 20 years. There is a memorandum book with the bills, not a clerk's book. It has 3 lines in it, and they are small and upright, and the 7s are crossed. She passed it across. Everard opened it. His mother's writing on the flyleaf of a stationer's memorandum book, in ink gone brown, an entry, 3 lines, referring to an order given at Gaunt's shop in Aldersea in the September before she died. You have gone very white, said Ruth. It says Marlowe. Then it is not a forgery, she said at last, steadily, and I am not a felon, and I would like a moment, if you please, because I have been 11 weeks being one. She turned away and stood at the black window with her back to him and her hands flat on the sill, and Everard Cale had the sense not to move or speak, which he counted afterwards as the only entirely correct thing he did in November. Why me? She said. Why should your mother, whom I never saw, leave a standing order at a stationer's for a card to a house in Cropstone Row? I do not know. You have no notion at all? None, said Everard. My mother was a kind woman, and I was 11, and nobody in that house ever explained anything to me, and I am beginning to think that is not an accident either. Lady Honoria had served the notice properly this time, half a year in writing, under her own hand, on the lessee of the schoolroom, passage and 2 rooms in Cropstone Row. The term ended at Lady Day, the 25th of March, and on the same morning the subscribers of the Cropstone Row School, 5 gentlemen and the vicar, who between them found the £11 a year that kept the stove alight, gave notice that they would meet in the vestry room on the 20th of March to consider whether the school should continue after Lady Day, and whether Miss Marlowe was a fit person to be trusted with the daughters of respectable men, there being a question outstanding as to a certain card of invitation which Mr. Dole had that week laid before the magistrate's clerk. Everard read the notices in her schoolroom with 7 girls chained the kings of England behind him. 20th of March, said Ruth. It is a Friday. I looked. They cannot try you in a vestry. They can do worse than try me. They can decide about me, which is what men in vestries are for. She was tying up a girl's sash as she said it quite evenly. Your Grace, understand it plainly, because I do. On the 20th I am judged by 6 men who will have heard your aunt's version at every dinner table between now and then. On the 25th my lease ends and I have nowhere to go and £6.10 to find. And somewhere between those 2 dates a magistrate's clerk is looking at a card with your family's plate mark on it and my name on the back. I have your mother's memorandum, he said. I mean, my mother's. You have 3 lines in a dead woman's hand in a book in your own house, said Ruth Marlowe. They will say you wrote it yourself for a woman you danced with. That is what they will say, and they will be within their rights to say it, and the only person in England who can put it beyond saying is an old man with a ledger in Aldersea whom you have not gone to see. She smoothed the sash and turned the girl round and sent her back to her bench. 16 weeks, she said. I have taught in this room for 9 years. I will teach in it until the 25th of March, and then we shall see. So it stood through January, an old man's chest, a locked press, and 11 weeks to Lady Day. The gale that took half the tiles off Cropstone Row came on the 14th. Everard was there by 9 in the morning with a ladder and 2 men, and spent the day on a roof in the wet, and did not send word to anybody, and had the shutter rehung and the ridge made good before dark, and was in a temper the whole time because he was frightened, and knew it, and could not say what of. Afterwards she gave him tea in the cracked cup. Your Grace has tar on his cuff. I have tar in my hair. Miss Marlowe, Ruth, she said, you have been on my roof. It seems late to stand on ceremony. The stove ticked. The 7 girls had gone home at 2. Out in the yard the fowls had been blown into a corner and were expressing themselves about it. I remember an illness, said Everard, the autumn before my mother died. 6 weeks of it, and a great fire in my room, and my mother sitting up. I have never been able to remember what it was, and nobody in that house ever told me, and when I asked as a boy I was told not to distress her. I have not thought about it in 19 years, and since the night of the ball I have thought about nothing else. Ruth sat down opposite him with her hands round her own cup. My father was a surgeon in this street, she said, not a physician. A surgeon, which in Cropstone Row means the man who sets the bones and sits up all night and is paid in eggs. He died in the autumn, I was 7, of a fever, and my mother said only that he had been out in the wet on an errand for somebody's account and had come home soaked through. She never said whose. They looked at one another across a schoolroom table, for what was by the clock no time at all. I will go to the vestry on the 20th, said Everard. I will stand up in front of the vicar and the 5, and I will say that the card was issued by my house, on a standing order, in my mother's hand, and that Mr. Dole was mistaken and Lady Honoria was mistaken, and that any question of forgery dies in that room. Ruth, I am giving you my word, and I have never given it to anybody, so I have no idea what it is worth. Find out. I shall, she said. In February the county held its subscription concert at the Assembly Rooms in Aldersea. 300 people, wax lights, an Italian gentleman with a violin, and the whole of the neighbourhood waiting to see whether the Duke of Thurlow would sit with his aunt. Lady Honoria took his arm in the passage before the doors opened. You have written to the vestry. I have. Then let me ask you one question, Everard, and let me ask it while there is still time for you to be sensible. She was perfectly calm. Do you know why your mother left that order at Gaunt's? No, said Lady Honoria, nor does the county. 19 years. A card every October to a house in Cropstone Row, paid for out of the Thurlow account and never entered on any list, and you propose to stand up in a parish vestry and read it aloud, and let 6 men and a clerk of the magistrates, and every dinner table in this county invent the reason for you. Your mother has been dead 19 years. She cannot say a word for herself. You will have made her the subject, my dear, and you will not be able to unmake her the subject, and the woman in Cropstone Row will be talked of in the same breath and in the same way. Think, before you are noble at other people's expense. He thought of his mother's small upright hand and the crossed sevens, and he was afraid that was the whole of it, and he never afterwards allowed himself any softer word. He was afraid of what was in a stationer's ledger in Aldersea. And he had 4 weeks in which to be brave, and he spent that evening being careful. The vicar of Cropstone came to him in the interval, in front of perhaps 40 people, with a glass of negus in his hand and the best intentions in the world. Your Grace, there is a question everyone is asking, and I would rather ask it plainly. Is it true that the card was your own house's, and that the poor woman is entirely innocent? The room went quiet in patches, the way rooms do, and then all at once. The matter is my aunt's, said Everard Cale. I have nothing to say tonight, that was all. 9 words. He heard them come out of his own mouth and knew, before the vicar's face had finished changing, exactly what he had done. Ruth Marlowe was not at the concert. She heard it before noon the next day, because Aldersea is 9 miles from Cropstone Row, and a thing like that travels at the speed of a gig. 2 more fathers took their daughters away that week. 5 became 3. The chandler's wife, who had sent Ruth a loaf every Saturday for 9 years, did not send one, and sent one the week after an apology, which was worse. He went to her on the Thursday. She let him into the schoolroom and did not sit down, and did not let him sit down. I do not want an apology, she said. I want you to hear the account, and then I want you to go home. 9 words, Your Grace. You did not deny me. You did not lie about me. You did the thing that is exactly 1 degree better than lying, which is to stand in a lighted room in front of 40 people and decline to say the true thing, and every one of those 40 people went home and told it as though you had said the other. I did not lose my school in October when your aunt called me a felon. Everybody in this street knew what her ladyship was. I lost it in February when the man who had taken my hand in front of 100 people had nothing to say. Ruth, go home, she said. You are not a wicked man. You are a man who has never once had to be brave in public, and I cannot afford to be the place where you learn. The vicar wrote to Thurlow House on the Monday. Miss Marlowe had been to the vestry that morning. She had withdrawn in writing her request that the Duke of Thurlow attend the meeting of the 20th of March. She would answer the question of the card herself, alone, and would call no witness but her own. She asked only that the committee sit at 10 and not at noon, since she had a journey to make first. She had not said where. She had not written to him at all. You are not to speak, the vicar said in the porch, on the morning of the 20th of March. Forgive me, Your Grace. She was very particular. You may sit the back and you may hear it, but the moment you stand up she has said she will stop and go and not come back. I understand. Everard sat at the back on a bench meant for the parish poor, and took off his hat and put his hands on his knees and did not move for 2 hours. Ruth Marlowe came in at 10 exactly. She had on the same grey silk, brushed and pressed, and a plain bonnet, and she carried a japanned box and a market basket, and behind her, walking very slowly on the arm of a boy of about 9, came an old man in a greatcoat with a muffler round his throat and a ledger under his arm. Mr. Gaunt of Aldersea, she said, who has engraved the Thurlow cards for 41 years. He is 83 and his chest is bad, and he has come 9 miles this morning, so I ask the committee to let him sit down at once and to hear him before anything else, because it is my case and I will not spend it on an old man's lungs. Miss Marlowe, said the vicar, the charge is that on the night of the 21st of October you entered Thurlow House upon a card that was not issued by that house. Before you answer it, is it true that His Grace of Thurlow offered to attend today and give evidence for you? It is true. And that you refused it? I withdrew it, said Ruth. This is my name, sir, not his. If I clear it with a duke standing beside me, then for the rest of my life this parish will say that I was cleared by a duke. I would rather be believed on my own account than acquitted on somebody else's, and if that is pride, it is the only property I have got, and I have had it a long time. Everard at the back put his knuckles against his mouth and kept them there. Then let us have the card, said the vicar. She laid it out. The card, the boy from over the chandler's, who said the postman gave it him on the 8th and he carried it up because Miss Marlowe had taught him his letters. The number pricked in the corner, 214, and then of the japanned box. A bound counterfoil book with a marbled cover. Every card Mr. Gongraves is numbered and the stub is kept, she said. It is his trade and his protection. The stub of 214 is on that page, and has been on that page since the printing in September. It reads, Marlowe, Cropstone Row, 1 card, standing order. Miss Marlowe, said Lady Honoria, this is a great deal of trouble to take over 14 pence. It is a great deal of trouble for your ladyship, said Ruth. For me it is 9 years' work and a roof. Mr. Gaunt, are you able? The old man had his ledger open on his knees already. I have been ill, he said, in a thin voice that the whole room leaned in to hear, and my daughter would have kept me at Kirby, and the young woman came out to Kirby in January in the snow, and again in February, and sat with me and asked me nothing at all on the bad days. She would not have the key off me. She waited until I could bring the book myself. I would have every gentleman here take note of that. He turned the ledger round. The 17th of September that year, he said. In her Grace's own hand, and I stood at the counter while she wrote it, and I have the pen still in a drawer, because I am a foolish old man. It says, Mr. Gaunt, you will add to the Thurlow list, and keep upon it while your plates last, and afterwards 1 card in perpetuity to the house of Marlowe, surgeon of Cropstone Row. It is to go every year, whether it is used or not, and whether I am living or not. If any person asks you why, you will say that it is by my direction, and no other reason need be given. There was a silence in that vestry room like the silence under water. But you know the reason, said Ruth quietly. Do not tell it for me, Mr. Gaunt. Tell it because it is true. I know it, said the old man, because her Grace told me at the counter, and because the whole of Aldersey knew it for a fortnight and then was told to forget it, and this county is very obedient about forgetting. He looked at the ledger and not at anyone. The 10th of that September, the water came down at Thurlow Ford after 4 days' rain. His Grace that is now, he was a boy of 11 then, was brought off the far side on a pony and the pony went down. Mr. Marlowe, the surgeon of Cropstone Row, was on the near bank with his bag, going home from a confinement. He went in after the boy and he got him out, and he was in the water a long while, and he walked home wet through 9 miles because there was no one to send. The boy had a fever 6 weeks and lived. Mr. Marlowe took the fever too and he did not. He died on the 12th of November, and he left a widow and a girl of 7, and her Grace went to the funeral in a plain carriage, and came into my shop on the way back, and wrote what I have read you. He closed the ledger. That is why there are always 3 cards more than there are houses, he said. One of them has been going to Cropstone Row for 19 years, and it is not charity, and it is not a favour, and no one in Thurlow House ever had the right to strike it out. At the back of the vestry, on the bench meant for the parish poor, Everard Cale sat perfectly still and understood that on the night of the ball, in front of 400 people, he had reached out and taken the hand of a woman whose father had gone into the water for him, and that he had opened his mouth in a lighted room in February and had nothing to say. The charge is dismissed, said the vicar, and I will have it written in the parish book in those words, and I will read it from the desk on Sunday. Mr. Clerk, the card goes back to Miss Marlowe and nowhere else. It was Mr. Dole who broke, and he broke quietly, which was somehow worse than if he had shouted. I engross the list every November, he said. 11 years I have engrossed it. The order to leave the Marlowe name off the fair copy was given to me by her ladyship the year Miss Marlowe opened her school, and the cards still went out, because the standing order is with Gaunt and not with the house, and I did not know how to stop that without a great deal of asking. I have been leaving a name off a list for 11 years, sirs. I did not think of it as a thing a man could be ruined by. Why, said the vicar. In God's name, my lady, why? Lady Honoria Prue sat very straight in her black. Because it was a perpetual reminder, she said, that this family owed a debt to a surgeon in Cropstone Row, and that we had never paid it, and could not. Every October that card went out, and every October I saw it and knew what it was. My sister-in-law had a great deal of feeling and very little sense of what a house can carry, and when the daughter took a school and went into trade, I told myself that the connection had become impossible. She looked, for the first time that morning, at Ruth. I was going to say that I did it for the house. I find I cannot say it in this room. I did it because it was easier to strike out a name than to look at it. Then Everard stood up at the back, and Ruth Marlowe turned round and looked at him, and after a moment she inclined her head, which was permission, and which he had not expected and did not deserve. He did not speak in the vestry. He asked one thing of the committee, that they meet him at the assembly rooms at Aldersea on the Thursday and bring anybody they liked. 300 people came. It was the same room, the same wax lights, and very nearly the same 40 faces standing near the door. In February, said the Duke of Thurlow from the top of that room, the vicar of Cropstone asked me in front of you whether the card was my own house's and whether Miss Marlowe was innocent. I said, the matter is my aunt's. I have nothing to say tonight. 9 words. I want every person who heard them to hear these. The card was issued by my house. It has been issued by my house every October for 19 years, by the standing order of my mother, written in her own hand at a counter in this town on the 17th of September in the year that Marlowe, surgeon of Cropstone Row, went into Thurlow Ford after a boy of 11 on a drowning pony brought him out, walked 9 miles wet through, and died of the fever 6 weeks after. I was the boy. I did not remember it. I had been carefully assisted not to remember it. That woman's father is the reason there is a Duke of Thurlow standing in front of you at all. Her name was struck off a list in my house, by my people, in my name for 11 years, and I signed the bills. She was called a felon on my staircase in front of 400 of you, and not one of us contradicted it. She lost 11 pupils, and then 8, and then 5, and then 3, and I could have ended it in one sentence in February in this room, and I was afraid of what I might find in an old man's ledger, and I said 9 words instead. She would not let me clear her. She did it herself on foot in the snow, twice out to Kirby, and she asked me to sit at the back and be quiet, and it was the only useful thing I have done in the whole business. Nobody applauded. It was not that kind of silence. You are too easy with her, Everard said. I am not easy with her at all, said Ruth. She will live 9 miles from a village that knows exactly what she did, and she will go to church in it, and nobody will ever say a word to her about it. There is no punishment in England like being forgiven in a small county. The subscribers came back in a rush, and the county with them, and by Michaelmas there were 31 girls in the schoolroom in Cropstone Row and 2 rooms taken next door and a young woman engaged to help. Everard subscribed nothing. I ruined it once by being interested in it, he said. I will not do it twice. What he did instead was to buy the lease outright from the Prue estate and convey it to the parish for a peppercorn, with 3 trustees who were not him and could not be, so that no landlord living could ever put the school out of that room. And the deed said nothing whatever about Miss Marlowe, because she had told him it must not, and he had learned by then to listen. They set a stone at Thurlowford in June on the near bank, cut with a surgeon's name and 1 line beneath it, and he asked her there. I have nothing to offer you that squares it, he said. I have thought for 3 months about what would, and there is nothing. A man cannot pay for that. I can only tell you that I have been shown, at 30 years of age and in front of my whole county, exactly what I am when I am frightened, and that I would rather spend the rest of my life becoming something else with you in the room than be comfortable anywhere without you. Will you have me? You held out your hand to me in front of 400 people when you had no reason on earth to do it, she said. You were wrong about a great many things afterwards, and you have said so where it cost you. But you did that first, before you knew a single thing about my father, and it is the only piece of evidence I have that you are what you were the night you did it. She put her hand into his, dry and cool and steady, the same as it had been in the second set. Yes, she said. They were married at Cropstone in the autumn, from the schoolroom, and 31 girls lined the street and sang badly and were given oranges. The Thurlow Ball list is engrossed fresh every November still. It has 211 houses on it, and at the head of the first page, above them all, in a small upright hand that crosses its sevens, One line is written out afresh each year by the Duchess of Thurlow herself, Marlowe of Cropstone Row, one card in perpetuity. If any person asks why, they shall be told the whole of it.